Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today I want to talk about a game that's been cooking for a hell of a long time, and that game is Scorn. For the uninitiated, Scorn is that game that is heavily inspired by the art of H.R. Giger. He is the man who is entirely responsible for the look of the xenomorph in Alien. There's also an equal influence from Polish surreal horror artist Zdzisław Beksiński, a man who has made numerous intricate and disturbing pieces of art. The visual style is what captured people's attention back in the day, and it's easy to understand why. And that was a hell of a long time ago. I remember first seeing the teaser trailer back in 2016, and yet it was announced even before that, way back in 2014. In a nutshell, the developers wanted to finance the game through Kickstarter, but their first campaign in 2014 was unfortunately unsuccessful. Though Ebb Software did launch a second Kickstarter campaign in 2017, and luckily for them, this one was successful. However, it would take another 5 years of development before we would be able to get our hands on this long-awaited horror experience. And now, Scorn has finally released. Honestly, I have no idea how this game is going to fare commercially. Personally, I fear the worst. Critically, the consensus has been rather mixed. Some people love it, others are on the fence, and some absolutely hate it. Which honestly doesn't surprise me one bit. This will not be everyone's cup of tea. I'd say that applies even to those who have been interested in this game from the beginning. All this time, it was never clear what kind of game it would be on launch. Would it be a survival horror game? Would it be an action shooter? Or would it be a walking simulator? Not clear. And I dare say that the game's ambiguity not only remains after having finished its roughly 5-hour campaign, but that ambiguity deepens significantly. From the first moments of Scorn right up until the very end, I had one repeated thought in my head. What in the fuck am I playing? It's a very alien gaming experience, and I'm not merely referring to the H.R. Giger references, which undoubtedly are there. I really mean that as a comment on the user experience. Absolutely nothing is explained to you. You wake up and emerge naked. You look like a corpse from crying out loud. You're simply thrown into a seemingly impenetrable and labyrinthine style of level design. It is a desolate and grotesque world to be lost in. Honestly, it's a bold move, one that most games probably would never take. Usually as a designer, you put the player in a tutorial where they have a 1 + 1 = 2 situation. Though here, it feels like moments after your first interaction, they throw a 7 + 14.6 to the power of 12x divided by y. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but shit, what a first challenge. You're presented with a giant room with a bunch of things to interact with that don't work and are missing things, with a giant gate that isn't opening, with a bunch of tunnels and side rooms that all kind of look like each other, with more interactions that don't yield any hopeful results or seemingly meaningful information. And as if that weren't enough, there's a whole second floor which adds yet more cryptic elements to this multi-layered puzzle. Yeah, it's an overwhelming start to the game. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people at this point got frustrated and just flipped the table at this very first multi-layered puzzle. That, or just looked up a guide on YouTube. Normally, I'd say that it's bad level design, but I think it perfectly supports the ambience that this game is trying to achieve. And on that note, I think it excels. Plus, it was a damn good puzzle, and incredibly satisfying to me personally once I figured everything out on my own. I will note, however, that the difficulty curve starts off really steep, as I mentioned, though gradually I feel like it diminishes in difficulty as you progress throughout the game. However, all that being said, the most remarkable part of Scorn are the visuals, which incidentally were the singular driving factor that was keeping the hype throughout all these years of its development hell. Holy shit, this game looks amazing. Some of the most memorable and insane displays of art direction I've seen all year long. The atmosphere is literally a 10 out of 10. H.R. Giger and Zdzisław Beksiński would be proud. And I am not going to go into further detail on the art style. Go check out the game for yourself. Simply wow. And all of that being said, this is yet another 2022 game with excessively disturbing sexual content. And I think it's a safe bet to say that Scorn takes that up several notches higher. If you're remotely familiar with the art of H.R. Giger, I think you have a pretty decent idea of what you're getting into with Scorn. The game is chock full with not so subtle sexual imagery. You're constantly putting your fingers into wet, fleshy things and pumping a switch with your penis poker gun thing. Yes, you heard me, I wish I were exaggerating. And your ammo and health pouch is this weird vaginal looking thing. It's all quite bizarre and things only escalate from there. Now I did mention that weird phallic gun poking thing, which alludes to some combat gameplay. And though indeed you do have a few weapons at your disposal, that does not mean this is an action game. In fact, most of the combat is completely optional, and if I do have one word of recommendation, avoid as much as possible. The near corpse-like character you incarnate is slow as molasses in terms of navigation, and reloading your selected weapon is super slow as well, or even switching through your weapon type. And while we're talking about the reloads of guns in this game, my god, some of the most disturbing and cool animations I've ever seen in any game for reloads. What the fuck? Anyway, the enemies can be very aggressive, and especially in larger numbers, death can come swiftly. Honestly, you are at a disadvantage here. And the difficulty is compounded by the very fragile state of health of your character, and a very limited resource distribution for both health and ammunition. Honestly, I get the feeling the developers are trying to achieve here, but unfortunately the combat ends up being much more frustrating than it is difficult. And this is in large part due to a rubbish save system which almost always throws you back much further than feels necessary. You are forced to redo some very mundane puzzle actions a couple times due to some unfair checkpoint saves paired with a frustrating group of enemies. I see no reason why checkpoint can't be given right after completing several steps of a puzzle. Honestly, the game does itself no favors here. This is some low-hanging fruit that could have been easily solved and made the gameplay experience much more enjoyable than it is right now. Finally, while I'm complaining about things, I must chastise the developers on their first-person camera controls. I'm not prone to having motion sickness in FPS games, but Scorn really did a number on me. Do yourself a favor, go into settings and turn off the motion blur immediately. Absolutely atrocious design choice for 3Cs. I haven't felt like this since the first days when I was working as a level designer on that VR game called Transference. Bottom line, it's hard to make heads or tails of this game. It's an impenetrably ambiguous game that is likely to turn off a lot of players. And there's not much story to be found here either. Having finished the game, I have more questions than ever and very few answers walking away from this experience. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. However, if you're expecting a fucked up roller coaster horror ride right in time for your Halloween party, I dare say you and your guests will be sorely disappointed. The pace of Scorn is a slow death march into the deep unknown. However, at the very least, you'll have beyond excessive amounts of disturbing visuals. That you will have in spades. Once again, I just can't praise the insane art direction enough. Absolutely mind-blowing and totally warrants the trip in this game just for that. However, I understand that this isn't going to be a game that pleases everyone, perhaps even most people, but I must applaud the developers to sticking to their cryptic vision no matter how off-putting it may be. As far as I'm concerned, I think this is a unique gaming experience that we rarely ever get in modern gaming. It will surely stand out as one of the most divisive games of the year, yet at the same time I think it holds its ground perfectly as one of the grandest artistic statements of 2022. If you have the Xbox Game Pass and you're remotely interested in these kind of oddball gaming experiences, go check it out. It's a no-brainer. Yes, without a shadow of a doubt, Scorn has its issues. Yet, it was a grotesquely mesmerizing and memorable experience for me. Therefore, I think it warrants an 8 out of 10 from me. It took a mighty long time to pull off, but the end result is pretty phenomenal. But that's just my opinion. I may very well be in the minority here, so please leave a comment below if you feel differently. And if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. The Bottomless Pit channel is still very much a young sprout, so any support I get from you guys goes a long way and is much appreciated. I have so much to learn, but honestly, I love the process, and that's the way I like it. I would be super bored if I weren't challenged in learning new things. So yeah, loving the process, and slowly but surely, I will be building myself up to going and making more ambitious videos in the near future. So stay tuned until then. And by the time this video is complete, I imagine that I will have started A Plague Tale Requiem, a game that I've been really anticipating all year long. Honestly, one of the games I've been looking forward to the most. So I'm ecstatic to dive into that world and see what it holds. And that is all for today. As always, wishing you and your loved ones nothing but the best. Take care and talk to you soon.